If you've clicked on this video, I'm going to assume that you want to finish your songs so you can share them with the world. But finishing them fast means you'll get less frustrated with the end result, you'll actually enjoy the process more, and you'll end up with better quality music because you're not overthinking everything. So here are 9 different ways you can finish your music faster. As part of this video, I want to give you our free song finishing checklist, which is a document that you can use every time you're finishing a song just to make sure that everything is ready, professional sounding, and good to go for release. So you can grab that below. Okay, so number 1 is to prepare your ideal template. Now, as you can see here, I've got a template loaded up. It's just a great starting point, so you're heading in the right direction from the moment you open your DAW. You've got your tracks labeled and colored. You've got any plugins or anything that you need loaded up already. And it just means you don't have to worry about the blank canvas every time you go to make a song. Now, as you can see here, I like to have my kick, snare, hats, a drum break layer for a loop, a bass line, vocal, some instruments and some effects, but you can have as many or as little tracks in your project. You can have sends with different reverbs. You can have stuff on your master like I do here, like limiting, referencing plugins so I can analyze stuff. It's really up to you. What I would say though is don't make it too complicated, because if you narrow your focus too much, it's gonna always push your music in a certain specific direction that can have the opposite effect, and it can make it actually more confusing to start songs. So I'd recommend having a simple yet effective starting template so that you can get to work and enjoy making music. Now, this concept leads me to number 2, which is just to use less channels in your music. Now, a couple of years ago, I actually wrote an article on the EDMProd blog called "Why Using More Channels Does Not Make You a Better Producer." And it was a bit controversial at the time, but the basic premise of having a lot of channels, which, sometimes you look at professional producers and see they have hundreds of channels. Like I've seen Madion has so many in his projects sometimes, and feeling guilty that you're not using as many, but realizing that, hey, actually it's not about how many channels are in my project. It's about what the overall end result sounds like. And you can get it to a good end result with 10 or 100 channels. And in fact, I'd actually recommend that you start by using the least amount of channels possible to get the end result you desire. For example, I've got a project here that I'm working on. If we look at it in terms of the individual elements that are going on here, we've got a drum loop. We've got some synth chops, which is consisting of 2 different channels, but one's just a slightly different pitch. So got a key stab channel, got like a mallet ambience, got a vocal sample, and I've got a bass line here, 808, some analog effects, and a crash with 2 layers. So it's a really simple amount of channels, but this is what it sounds like all together. And in reality, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sounds in this track. Now you could go and break the drums down. There are a few different channels within this drum. So there's 7 channels, or 6 that are being used. This one's turned off because I'm going to use that later. But the point here is that they're one sound, maybe the shaker and fill you could take out because they only happen at certain parts in the drum arrangement. Basically, 10 to 12 tracks, and that's it. And it's a good full sounding track in my opinion. Most of my tracks probably hit around that 20 mark by the end. 20 to 30, it's really not about how many channels you use, and using less channels and thinking not thinking you need to use them all means that you'll just be focused on getting a cool end result and not worrying about, oh man, there's not enough layers, there's not enough sounds, I need to thicken this one up more drums, more snares, more bass lines, No, just simplify, use what you need, and move on. Okay, so number 3 is to use stock tools instead of third-party tools. Okay, let's compare using a stock EQ with a third-party EQ on our kick drum here. I'm going to quickly load up an EQ8 and high pass. Easy. Let's do the same thing with a third-party EQ. But let's say I wanted to now go add saturation. Okay, I have to find my third-party saturator. Open the plugins folder. Which one was it? Decapitator. Okay. Great. Let's add a bit of drive. And now I want to go back to my EQ and just boost out, cut out that. Now I want to go back to my decapitator and I want to boost that, right? And now I want to add some, you know, multi-band compression. So let's go to our dynamics, add some Pro MB. I want to duck that out there, let's say. Now I want to go back and tweak this. I have to click on each thing, and every single time it's like I'm moving between. Whereas if I instead didn't have these third-party ones, and I just had the Ableton Saturator, Multimedia Dynamics, I can tweak this here. EQ that out there. Adjust the band here. You know, I'm not switching between any interfaces, and it just makes it way, way simpler for me to adjust things. When you think about it, it's like, yeah, the engineers of my DAW made these plugins and these devices to be used in the native environment of my DAW. So of course it's going to be a faster, more efficient workflow. Now you might be thinking, well, what about the time where there's a plugin that does something that my stock tools don't do? And I'm not anti-plugins. I'm just saying, I think you should be reaching for the minimum viable tool to do what you want. You know, in 90% of cases, EQ8 is going to do what I want. You know, Pro Q3 has a few functions that, yeah, okay, it's better, but I'm not necessarily going to use all those functions. So why would I just not use EQ8 instead? Decapitator. Why would I not just use Saturator instead unless it's a very specific thing I'm going for? It's just thinking about what you're doing, using the stock tool, and then you can always go and replace it with a third-party tool later if you really want that specific sound. And let's be honest, how many of these third-party plugins do you actually use regularly? Like, it's a good question to ask. Okay, so number 4 is to learn your keyboard shortcuts. So I've got this mallet sound here, solo it. So what I'm gonna do is take the second version here, paste it here, crossfade it real quick. I'm gonna consolidate this into one sample, reverse it, and chop it up. And I'm gonna show you how to do that with both on my mouse manually and with keyboard shortcuts. Mouse first, let's go. Select this all, right click, consolidate. Then I'm going into the sample. I have to find the reverse button. Where do they put it these days? Yeah, this would be helpful if I actually knew. There we go. There's the reverse button. Boom. And then let's chop this. Split there. Split there. Move it around. Move it around. Okay, let's undo all that and let's redo it with keyboard shortcuts. Command J, R, Command E, or rename. Boom, done, easy. That is the power of keyboard shortcuts. I don't think I really need to explain anything there. You can find lists for your DAW's keyboard shortcuts online, or if you're a super nerd, you can just grab one of those like keyboard covers that show you all the shortcuts and then flex on your friends how much of a producer you are. Up to you. 5 is to use less processing and better source material. Now back up to our snare up here in our original drum arrangement. I'll show you the drums again so we can just hear them in isolation. So we've got a snare layer here. Nice and snappy and in the top end. I really like this sample. But let's say we didn't have a snare like that and the only snare we could find was this. Zoom in so you can see what's going on. Very different sounds. This sound is flabby, it's dull, it's very acoustic and not very well, like it doesn't have a lot of punch for me. So I'd have to do a lot to change this sample to make it anywhere similar. I'd have to, you know, fade the tail down. I'd have to grab an EQ, cut out the low end, boost up the tops, you know. Maybe I'd have to grab like a transient designer or something like that to try and bring out the punch. Bring out some more of that low end. Add a limiter on the end to make sure it doesn't, you know, clip. And look how close we get. Okay, it sounds better, but I just spent like, you know, 5 minutes at rapid speed. It feels like, it probably wasn't that long, but I spent time trying to make this sample sound like this sample. And it's not close enough and it doesn't sound as good for what I'm trying to go for. Just choose a better sound from the beginning. Choose a good sound. You've got no excuse. There's literally so many good professionally engineered sample packs and preset packs out there that you just don't have to do this. At least you don't have to do this in the sessions where you're writing tunes. You know, doing them outside in a sound design session is something I'll cover soon. That's separate though. Don't do it while you're making tunes. It's just gonna take away from that creative flow and it means you're gonna spend ages making songs. But yeah, this leads me into number 6, which is to prepare your library beforehand and spend some time in a separate sound design session. Let's delete our snare here because we don't want that anymore. And you'll see here, I've actually got a few collections of sounds. They're a bit empty at the moment, but I actually spend a lot of time curating my favorite sounds beforehand so that I can drag, a cool sound into my session straight away without having to worry about, spending hours trawling through my sample packs trying to find the right sound. I've already done that work. And I've also got my own original samples curated in specific packs. I've used this little exclamation mark here, I've got sounds there ready to go that I can use that I've made in separate sound design sessions. Again, so I'm not spending all this time creating sounds. I'm bringing sounds together to create music. That's what writing tunes is all about. It's not about, crazy technical processes. That's a separate part of my brain at least, and I like to do that beforehand. So that is a huge time saver when it comes to making music. In terms of organizing them, like I said, collections in Ableton is a great way to filter out certain sounds from anywhere on your hard drive. In terms of folder structure, I like the messy system. I'm not super duper organized. I've tried being very meticulously organized, but just having a place for your samples. I like to use an audition folder for samples that I haven't yet checked out to see whether the pack is any good or not, especially with free samples, and an archive for samples that I used to use but no longer use, but I keep them just in case my old projects won't load. And that's really it. Samples I'm currently using, audition, archive, and then I'll save a few of my key favorite samples in these collections. Okay, so number 7 is to move out of the loop trap in your first production session if possible. What do I mean by this? I mean to move away from your 8 to 16 bar loop and try and actually start structuring arrangement ASAP. Now you can see, as I've done in this song here, I haven't just got this one 16 bar loop. I've actually started bringing in other elements and changing the arrangement for this second repeat here. There's a slightly different arrangement with the amount of sounds. There's less of the vocal here and here. This bass line does continue, but this shaker loop fill, this is different stuff. So my song is evolving over time. More space. So it's just stuff like that as soon as you can, break out of your loops, start moving things around, start making an actual track. And one thing I do this, which is a huge help, is to actually, as soon as I start a track, map out my arrangement markers like I've done here. I've got my intro specified, breakdown, build, drop, all the parts of the drop, the second breakdown, the second drop, the outro, the end of the tune is all mapped out. So I already know where I'm going before I've even made the song. And you can do this by feel or by using a reference track that you really like. Doesn't really matter. Structures are all much of a muchness, really. They're all variations on a theme. This is actually something I cover specifically in my 7-day song finishing system course. So if you want to find out exactly how I go about this and how you can finish a song like this in a week, check it out in the description. We've had hundreds of producers sign up and it's changed the game for the way and the speed at which they make music. Number 8 is really simple. It's just a matter of mixing as you go. I'm a big fan of doing mix downs at the end, but I find it makes it easier when you've done a lot of mixing as you go. And part of this obviously is through sample selection, through having good sounds from the get-go, but also just through balancing faders. And I honestly, all the time, I'm just constantly balancing faders because it's really easy for me just to vibe with it. I'm not overanalyzing things. I'm just hearing, this is too loud. This is too quiet. I'm just gonna bring this down, It's really simple, but the reality is 80% of your mix is the faders. And if you can get those right early on, you're going to have a good mix down at the end. And it's going to make the little tweaks you do at the end even easier because you've done all the groundwork for your mix. The other thing I also tend to do is to use high pass filters like so on my tracks. It just, cleans up a lot of space. For electronic dance music, you really need to be cleaning up that low end, and not everything needs a high pass, but that's the other really quick thing I will add on while I'm mixing as I go, because it just helps, get clarity out of the mix without, going deep into all these crazy EQ cuts and boosts all the time. Okay, and so number 9 is to simply use that song finishing checklist that I mentioned at the beginning. This is simply just a PDF that we've created that allows you to go through your core idea, arrangement, your mix, and even your master, and just make sure that everything is in tip-top shape, that you haven't forgotten everything. And it's really simple to follow, so it's not confusing, yet it's very cohesive at the same time, so you're not gonna miss anything. So grab this and just, stick it on your wall, have it on your computer somewhere that you can reference. You can even take this and make it your own, completely up to you. So grab this again in the description. And with that, I hope these 9 tips that I've just shared with you help you finish your songs faster and help you make more music that you like. If you like this, subscribe, like the video so others see it, and I'll see you in the next one.